one of the factors that can have a huge influence on our lives and elevate our lives from a good life to a great life is the quality of our decision making. And in today's video, I'm going to share with you a framework that I use that I have personally found very helpful. I hope you find it helpful as well. I'm going to begin the video with a short story about Michelangelo. I promise it ties into decision making. So let's jump in. The famous Michelangelo story where he said, David was always in the marble slab. I just had to reveal the figure of David that was already there. And like Michelangelo's David, each choice, each decision, each sacrifice that you make shapes the final person you become. The difference with decision making is you're both the creator and the created. It's kind of meta, I know. You're literally both Michelangelo and David. And each decision that you make, each blow of that chisel creates a masterpiece called you, a reflection of your life, whether that's a well-lived life or one that's filled with regret. Okay, so what is a good decision? And you're going to hear a lot of people like me, financial advisors, make this really complicated, but it's not. You know, at its essence, first off, only you can decide if it was a good decision, a great decision, or a lousy decision. But I would say a good benchmark is to look back in 3 months, in 6 months, a year, 5 years, a decade. And if you look back and say, I'm glad I made that decision the way I did, then you know what? It was a good decision and it may very well have been a great decision. So it's really that simple. Every good decision does not mean you have a good outcome. There's a difference between a good outcome and a good decision. A good decision is when you reflect back on and say, I'm glad I made that decision. A good outcome could very well be, you know what, that was a lousy decision, but you got lucky, right? I mean, truthfully, to buy a lottery ticket is probably a lousy decision. The odds are against you. But nobody's going to tell you you made a lousy decision if on Saturday night you found out you won the $1 billion jackpot, right? That looks like a pretty good decision. The framework that I mentioned earlier, the framework that I've used, and I've used this on at least a dozen really important decisions, probably closer to 20. And I look back at all of those, and for me, I'm very happy with the decision I made, right? Using that criteria of looking at the decision 3 months later, a year later, or 5 years later, it has helped me make decisions that I'm really happy with. But before we go there, I have a favor to ask. Would you please take a second and hit the like button? As a young and growing channel, it's really important to me and makes it a lot easier for other people to find this channel. And the more people that find my channel, the more videos like this I can share with you. For me, the framework that I've used, and again, it's simple. And I think many of the most powerful concepts in decision making, many of the most powerful concepts in financial advising are simple. And therein lies their power. So the frame that I take is, right now I'm 58 years old. When I'm looking to make a decision, I don't make the decision from the standpoint of being a 58-year-old. I make the decision as if I'm 80 years old. And I'm looking back on my life and saying, am I glad I did that? So the question on, your spouse comes to you and says, hey, we've got 2 great kids. I'd like to try for a third. And you're 35 years old. You've got a lot of responsibilities and you're trying to save money. You're trying to pay down your mortgage. You're thinking, how am I going to afford to send these kids to college, right? That frame is everything from your current life. So erring on the side of spending more time with your kids, erring on building that relationship with your spouse, erring on spending more time thinking about who am I outside of work. Really, for me, being able to look back when I'm 80 and have as few regrets as possible is really important. So to me, one of my criteria is minimizing my regrets when I'm 80. You know what? If I start a company and it doesn't work out, I'd rather do that than look back when I'm 80 and say, I had a chance and I think I could have done it. So I've shared earlier that I've made at least a dozen decisions using this framework. In all of those cases, I look back now after time has passed and I'm happy with the decision that I made. Let me give you an example of one of those decisions. I shared earlier, before I became a financial advisor, I was in private equity. And I was working a ton of hours and I was traveling a lot. And before kids, that was all fun. My wife would fly out on the weekends to wherever I was working. We'd have an adventure there. The work was really interesting. It was challenging. It was rewarding. I was in my mid-30s when my first child was born. So me thinking, gee, I can't be the type of father that I want to be, that was good thinking. But the thing that made it easy for me to say, you know what, I have to leave private equity. I have to do something else. It made it super easy, which was looking back at life when I'm 80 years old, and am I going to regret that I sacrificed my family in order to become a partner at this private equity firm? Or am I going to delight in the fact that I had the courage to make a change? I'm really glad that I made that decision. From the vantage point of looking back as an 80-year-old, it was a super easy decision. And that's the power of this framework. It's just so simple. And it adds a ton of clarity. Decisions matter. Your decisions matter. The sum of your decisions largely determine the type of person that you become. So bring out your chisel and start working on your masterpiece. I can't wait to see what you create. Until next time, I'm Azul Wells, encouraging you to take full advantage of the youth of your senior years. Remember, you're only young once. Use this time wisely.